This is the End Times News Report.
In the late 1800s, a political movement called Zionism got going in Europe. Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism or the ancient House of Israel, as many Christians today seem to think. Supporting the state of Israel does not mean that you're supporting the House of Israel from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Zionism was actually created by non-Hebrew Jews, and even today many Zionists aren't even Jewish. You can look at Vice President Joe Biden, for example. He calls himself a proud Zionist. He's not Jewish. Today, most of the deeply religious Jews, you know, the Hasidic guys, the guys in the black hats, the black outfits, the curls, most of them are very strongly anti-Zionist. Go to YouTube again. Just type in anti-Zionist Jews, and you'll see what I mean. Political Zionism is different from the religion, from Judaism. We don't have a problem with Jews. We don't have a problem with Judaism. We have a problem with Zionism. Keep that in perspective. Political Zionism is typically considered to be the brainchild of a German Jew named Theodor Herzl, but in truth, Zionism is synonymous with the name Rothschild. Remember that name. Who are the Rothschilds? They just happen to be the wealthiest family in human history. The name itself means red shield. Mayer Amschel Rothschild was a powerful banker in Germany in the 1800s who used the most low-down, dirty tactics conceivable to build and maintain the largest banking dynasty in the world, in all the world's history. Massive amount of wealth. Massive amount of power comes along with that wealth. The Rothschilds used political Zionism to help establish this empire. They and their allies, all wicked men who craved power and control, pushed for World War I, and they got it. Now, Britain, after the war was over, Britain took the land of Palestine from the Ottoman Empire in the post-war spoils. Rothschild was in control of many of these British politicians and used them to get what's called the Balfour Declaration, which led to the land of Palestine being given to these men for control. This was happening at the same time in U.S. history that the Zionists were creating the Federal Reserve banking system to take over control of the U.S. financial system. If you ever hear somebody talking about the Federal Reserve, look it up, study it. It is crucial that you understand the Federal Reserve. But back to Zionism. In time, these same wicked men funded the rise of the Third Reich. What is the Third Reich? You know what it is. These men supported Hitler the entire time he was rising to power. Remember, Rothschild was German banker. So once these men had used Hitler, got him into power, got Hitler to start all these new wars, going to reclaim lands that they had lost, so on and so forth, going after Poland. Well, what they started doing is they used Hitler just like the Zionists today use U.S. presidents to start wars around the world that benefit them. Hitler never could have risen to power without the funding that these bankers provided to him. Yes, Hitler did a lot of bad things and killed many people. I'm sure he is rotting in hell right now as we speak. He killed many Jews, but he did it with the financing of Zionist bankers like the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, and so on. After World War II, these same Zionists did the same thing that the Rothschilds had done previously. They used their power and influence over key politicians in the British government to gain increasing control over the lands of Palestine. And if you don't believe that wealthy people, wealthy bankers, wealthy corporations control our politicians, I'm sorry, you are naive and you have no idea how things really work. So these men distorted and exaggerated the atrocities that had been committed by Hitler in order to curry favor from other world leaders so that they too would support the creation of this modern state of Israel, which was to be controlled by these powerful families. So they control Israel to this day, just like they control most of Europe and America. This is not a theory. There is solid, irrefutable evidence for all of this, but it takes considerable time to learn the history and put the pieces together. If you want to know more, search my video archives. That means that the only people who really understand the history are either those people who are directly involved in the Zionist movement, or those people like me and other conspiracy theorists who invest the time to study boring things like old political documents, war treaties, and all those things that most people would never take the time to sift through. Let's just be honest here. The average American knows almost nothing about the history of our own country. So it's not surprising that they have no idea about the history of Israel, how it was established, and all the dirty tricks that were used to set up Israel. Americans don't even pay attention to our own political process, and those who think they're paying attention couldn't explain their beliefs if they tried. Go ask an Obama supporter why they support Obama. You'll see a lot of this, blah, 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 you hope and change. Americans need their facts summed up in 15-second sound bites. They have neither the patience nor the interest in learning the truth, which is why the Zionists got away with taking us to war with Iraq. It's also why Israel got away with the 2008 Gaza war, in which they slaughtered 1,500 Palestinian civilians. All they have to do is say that they're fighting the terrorists, and the dumb sheep repeat the propaganda, just like you hear from Fox News and all the people that listen to Sean Hannity. The men who control Israel today are the same people who sit at the top of the global power pyramid scheme that's building what's called the New World Order. The plan of these Zionists is to create a one world bank and a one world government with themselves as its leaders. They've created a vast network to accomplish all of this. This network includes things like the Bilderberg Group, Google it, Council on Foreign Relations, the Carlyle Group, on and on. Look up the Bohemian Grove. Oh my gosh. All the stuff in the Bible about the one world government controlling the people is real. The Antichrist leader, the mark of the beast, to buy or sell, the incredible end times wars, just substitute the actions of these New World Order Zionists into the phrases used by the Bible. And the Bible goes from being an ancient, mysterious book of prophecies and becomes just a straightforward commentary on modern geopolitical events. Interesting. Unfortunately, because most of the Zionists claim to be Jews, some are, some aren't, they can silence their opposition very easily by just calling everyone a Jew-hating anti-Semite. I guarantee you, if you go to, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, any message board where this issue is being discussed, I guarantee you, I would bet my last dollar that you will find half the people that are pro-Israel are going to be calling everyone else anti-Semitic. You hate Jews because you don't support Israel. It's a dirty tactic, but it works. So, what about me? My best friends growing up, I grew up in Miami, Florida. Lots of Jews in Florida. Most of my friends were Jews. When I got older, I dated Jews. Growing up, I went to Passover, Hanukkah, other Jewish celebrations so often. I had my own yarmulke, you know, the little hat that Jews wear. I'm not anti-Semitic. But if you search the comment sections, even on my own videos, you'll find the supporters of the Zionist movement call me anti-Semitic all the time. It just goes with the territory. Even today, someone was calling me anti-Semitic. It's an easy thing to do that dumb people who don't know any other way how to explain their positions, that's what they do. They just call you a Jew hater. A normal person doesn't like to be equated with Nazis and concentration camps, so they just keep their mouths shut when the Zionists start the name calling. I'm not bothered by the labels, so I just keep speaking the truth. If you are going to be talking about the Zionist movement, you need to be prepared for this as well. We could call Zionist anti-gentilic or anti-Arab, but that's not productive. I don't believe in getting down into the mud pit and wrestling with them. If someone is going to believe this stuff, they're going to believe it because they are open-minded. If someone's closed-minded, there's no chance. Zionism was a total transformation that flew in the face of what Judaism taught. The entire rabbinical hierarchy of Judaism was opposed to this movement of Zionism. They understood that Zionism was not compatible with Judaism. The first people actually to oppose the Zionists weren't non-Jews, they were fellow Jews. They were Jewish rabbis. This isn't history, this is a matter of historical record. The original plan of Zionism didn't even include the creation of the State of Israel. They wanted to establish political entities in places like Uganda and other lands. But with the stern opposition of the rabbis and the other practicing Jews, the Zionists quickly realized that nobody was going to follow them to Uganda and these other places. They wanted to set up their little mini empires. So they decided to fight fire with fire. If the roadblock was the religion of the Jewish people, then the Zionists had to figure out how to make the religion of the Jews work for them. Instead of trying to fight Judaism, they decided to use it, to manipulate it in a way that helped them get what they wanted. So, how did Zionists co-opt Judaism? Orthodox Jews believed that God drove the Jews from the ancient lands of Palestine as a result of their sin. This scattering of the Jews is called the diaspora. But they also believe that one day God himself is going to lead the Jews back to the land of their fathers. What the Zionists did is they capitalized on this dream of the Jewish people to return to their homeland. The Zionists basically said, we will lead you back, but you need to follow us. You need to sign on to what we're saying, what we're doing, and we'll get you back to Israel. So the rabbis back then saw this for what it was, a gross distortion of Judaism by non-religious but very powerful Jews who were willing to distort the religion to suit their nationalistic ambitions. Okay, you starting to see this? And so the rabbis continued to oppose the Zionists. To this day, hundreds of thousands of Orthodox Jews around the world refuse to return to the modern state of Israel. Why? Because they are waiting for the Messiah to lead them back to the lands according to what is taught to them in the scriptures. The most outspoken anti-Zionists are Jews, deeply religious, God-fearing Jews who are horrified at the absolute corruption of wicked men who have used Judaism as a tool to achieve political goals. So, the biggest opponent of the Zionist state of Israel today are Jews. What I'm going to do is prove this to you. I'm going to quote from a prominent Jewish rabbi, a man named Rabbi Yisrael Weiss. Rabbi Weiss is just one among countless Jews who are strongly opposed to Zionism. Let me read the rabbi's own words to you. You're going to love this. Our name, our identity has been hijacked by an evil, vile, selfish movement that is purely political and ungodly. And to try to get legitimacy, they use our identity, Judaism, the appearance of godliness, to intimidate others, to take away lands from other people, and to oppress them. It's important that we tell the world that, unfortunately, you are making a grand mistake. You should know that these people who are speaking in the name of the Jews have not only not been a protection for the Jewish people, but they are the worst factor of exacerbating anti-Semitism. Jews have been living together with Christians and Muslims for hundreds and hundreds of years in every Arab country. Until the Zionists, there wasn't this ingrained hate for the Jewish people. We were all able to coexist without any human rights groups. So what changed? So that now Jews can't live in Muslim and Arab countries. This relatively new movement, Zionism, that started not much more than 100 years ago, and since it has been around, we have had contention, death, strife, misery, bloodshed, and suffering. So what is the problem? Is it our religion? No. Jews and Muslims lived together in peace up until recently. What changed is Zionism. Zionism is a political movement that was created by non-religious Jews who wanted to transform our identity from a religious identity to a national identity. Their goal was to take God completely out of the equation. To ensnare the religious Jews and the evangelical Christians, they began pretending that theirs was a godly cause to take all the Jews out of exile. But the Jews and rabbis around the world stood up to them and said, "Are you crazy? God has scattered us, not because of our physical weakness as a people, but because of our sins." So the solution isn't a physical one of going back and taking up arms to win the lands. The solution is a metaphysical one, where God takes the people who have learned to live with peace in their hearts and restores them. And until he does that, we are expressly under oath not to return en masse to Israel, but to be loyal citizens in whatever nation we are living. This effort to build a political entity in Israel is simply against the words of God. It is rebellion against him to return to the lands of Palestine, even if the lands had been completely uninhabited. But being that it was a land that was already inhabited by a people, this rebellion against God became compounded by stealing and oppressing the people, stealing land and oppressing the people who already live there. How can we remain silent when the name of God and Judaism is being profaned and sullied by these people? We pray for the speedy and peaceful dismantlement of this evil, sinister state that has brought about so much death and suffering, namely Israel. That guy must really hate Jews. That's all I can say. Oh, geez. Are you seeing this, people? We are not anti-Semitic. We don't hate the Jewish people. We despise the political movement called Zionism because it is the source of great warfare, great tribulation, great bloodshed, the subjugating of people, the turning of people into slaves again, such as the Palestinians who live under occupation and oppression. This is what Zionism does, and that's why we oppose it. Welcome back to the End Times News Report. I'm Jake Morphonius. We've been talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In episode 1, I introduced you to Theodor Herzl and the Zionist movement, and the point at which the Rothschild banking dynasty got involved in the plan to take over the lands of Palestine. In episode 2, we talked about the mineral wealth of Palestine as the primary motivation for the Rothschild Zionist scheme to gain control over the land from the British. And we finished off with how Lord Walter Rothschild got the British government to write the Balfour Declaration in exchange for the Rothschild dynasty using its influence to bring the United States into World War I in order to save the British from stalemate or defeat at the hands of the Germans. In this episode, we're going to talk about what anti-Semitism is and why I take issue with those who use this charge to defend the actions of the Rothschild Zionists. So let's quickly finish up the discussion about the U.S. entry into World War I so we can get into that. Ultimately, the USA was manipulated into joining World War I and later World War II, both times against the wishes of the United States, at least against the wishes of the people of the United States. Government was all for it. And both times it took a manufactured event to get America into the war. In the case of World War I, it was the sinking of the Lusitania. And in World War II, of course, it was the attack on Pearl Harbor. You would think that after all the evidence that proves that the elites manipulated the circumstances around these events in order to sway the sentiments of the American people toward war, that the American people would, from that point on, be vigilant, be watchful for these kinds of false flag attacks or manufactured crises. But we know that's just not the case. Now, on the positive side, our people, not our government, but our people, have historically been peaceful. We don't want to send our children off to die in stupid wars in foreign lands for the benefit of the elites. But what the elites figured out is that Americans are ready and willing to pull the shades down over their eyes to go to war as long as it seems like somebody else attacked us first. If we think our cause is just, we'll go to war with anybody. Just look at the Gulf of Tonkin false flag that got us into Vietnam, or the September 11th attacks that launched America into what we really ought to be calling World War III, or World War IV if you want to count the Cold War as World War III.
We are slaughtering people in so many countries around the world today in the name of fighting terrorism right now that almost no Americans are even aware of the scale of warfare our nation is participating in. They have no idea. It's because the elites figured out, wait a second, why go to all the trouble of trying to persuade the American people to support this? Let's just get one great big blanket check authorization to fight terrorism wherever it may be, and then we'll just call everything terrorism, and we can conduct these wars wherever we want, whenever we want. And behind it all stand the Jewish bankers who are financing both sides of all these conflicts, just like Nathan Rothschild did during the Napoleonic War. That's one of the ways that he broke the Bank of England and made so much money for the family. I know it comes across to some people as anti-Semitic for folks like me to point out that the Jewish bankers are almost always involved in these events. Look, I'm not trying to single out the role of the Jews. It's just that war requires money that nations usually don't have on hand, huge expenditures to conduct a war. And so governments require loans. So they get loans from the bankers. And these top bankers, the banks that are big enough to be able to fund government operations, are in control of Jews. Jews just happen to be the overwhelmingly dominant group behind the banking industry. Always have been, always will be. Kind of like Italians are usually the guys running pizzerias. That's not racist for me to point that out. It's just common sense. So when I point out that for any business to make money, you have to create a need for your product or service, I'm not trying to be hateful toward the bankers because they're Jewish. I'm just pointing out that for these mega bankers to make money at the levels that they want to produce in order to get the kind of money that they're seeking, they have to manufacture the need for governments to get loans. And the way they do that is by stoking war so that the governments will ask the bankers for loans. And besides, people need to understand what an anti-Semite is. An anti-Semite is someone who is against Semites or Semitic people. But most of today's Jewry is not Semitic. Words matter. I can say I'm a black Japanese woman all I want. It doesn't make it so. These people who inhabit Israel today can say they're Hebrew Jews all they want, that they're descended from the Jews in the Bible, but that doesn't make it so. A Semite or Shemite in Hebrew is someone who is descended from Noah's son Shem. He had 3 sons, Shem, Japheth, and Ham. So you have to be descended from Shem to be a Shemite. This would include descent from people like Abraham. You can be descended from Ishmael. You can be descended from Isaac. You can be descended from any of the 12 sons of Jacob, including the one son Judah, if you want to be called a Jew. Jews used to only be descendants of Shem through the lineage of Judah, but their the people that we're talking about today, who are Jews in America and Israel, most of them are not literal blood descendants of Judah. They're not descended from the people in the Bible. They're descendants of 2 groups of people who converted to Judaism during a period of Muslim conquest. The Muslims would go around and they'd give you the option. You can become one of the people of the book, which are Christians, Jews, or Muslims, or you can have your head chopped off. You take your pick. So people would choose to convert. All right, so these people that make up today's Jews, most of them can be traced back to either the Ashkenazis or the Khazars. The Ashkenazis were Eastern Europeans, people who lived in what is today the western edge of present-day Ukraine. And the Khazars were Cossacks from the Ural Mountain region, just north of Turkey, or what is today modern-day Turkey. Neither group traces its lineage through the tribe of Judah or Jacob or Abraham, and definitely not through Shem. They were non-Semitic Gentiles who converted to Judaism to avoid the conflict with the Muslims after they were conquered. They're descendants of Noah's son Japheth, which means that today's Khazarian and Ashkenazi Jews are not Semites. The Palestinians are Semites. They are real Semitic people, but most of Israelis today are not Semitic. I know I'm mincing words here, but I'm just saying, if you're going to call me names, at least be accurate. Don't call me an anti-Semite. I'm very pro-Palestinian. So I'm not anti-Semitic. And I'm not anti-Jew either, if you want to throw that label at me. I grew up with Jews as my best friends down in Miami, Florida. My aunt was a Jew. I dated Jewish women. Today, my own family continues to celebrate Jewish Passover, which we've done for years. I'm not against Jews. I'm against the political movement called Zionism. There's a difference. I am anti-Zionist, not anti-Jew. And remember, most Orthodox Jews are also anti-Zionists as well. Are you going to call those Jews anti-Semites too? All right, I'm going to hop off that soapbox now. It just bugs me that so many people toss around emotionally charged labels like anti-Semite without even knowing what the phrase means. They do it because they can't beat me in a debate that involves inconvenient things like facts. So they just try to shame me and shut me up by equating me with Adolf Hitler. Say that I want to gas Jewish children to death and burn them in ovens because, well, I'm not gullible enough to fall for the Rothschild propaganda like they are. But I digress. Anyway, without any input from the existing Semitic Palestinian population, their lands were taken from them by the Western governments after World War II, under the influence of the Rothschild Zionists, and the State of Israel was created for the non-Semitic Gentiles who claim to be Jewish by virtue of conversion to Judaism. But it's very important to understand that Jews were not given all of the lands that they inhabit today. They weren't even given the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem wasn't given to Israel under the 1948 UN partition plan. But immediately after Israel was formed, it stormed into Jerusalem and captured the western half of the city. And years later, in 1967, Israel illegally annexed East Jerusalem, and they have refused to let it go ever since. They stole it from their neighbor Jordan. And every U.S. administration, both Republican and Democrat, acknowledges this fact. They also grabbed a lot of land that was supposed to be controlled by the Palestinians. And the tensions over the status of Jerusalem have been boiling over ever since. Donald Trump says that he intends to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. But that's what almost all the politicians say when they're running for office in order to pander to the powerful Israeli lobby in Washington, D.C. But we'll see what happens. No matter what, the issue of the status of Jerusalem is a powder keg waiting to explode. Both Jews and Palestinians claim the city as their own capital. So how do you resolve that?